All right, let's get into this. If you think a 400-year-old Shakespeare play is just dusty required reading, you are about to have your mind blown. Hamlet is basically the ultimate messy true crime saga. We are talking highly toxic family dynamics, intense paranoia, a royal court built entirely on lies, and the absolute worst-case scenario of leaving people on read while you overthink every single detail. Buckle up, because we're deconstructing this masterpiece like never before. So before we look at the evidence of what went so completely wrong in Denmark, we gotta ask ourselves a core question. What actually happens when a murdered king demands revenge, but the guy tasked with the hit is literally just a chronically overthinking college student? He's stressed, he's anxious, and he simply cannot stop analyzing the situation. Honestly, that stressful hesitation, that is the exact engine driving this entire disaster. To figure this all out, we're mapping the classic 5-act structure out like an evidence board for this explainer. Here is our roadmap. First, the ghost demands revenge. Second, a web of spies and paranoia. Third, the mousetrap springs. Fourth, escalation and collateral damage. And finally, the anatomy of a murder. Section 1, the ghost demands revenge. This is our inciting incident, setting a super spooky, bitter cold scene right on the ramparts of Elsinore Castle. Okay, picture this. It's the dead of night, the guards are completely on edge, and the ghost of the recently deceased King Hamlet just straight up appears to his son. And the truth he drops is absolute horror. He didn't die of natural causes. No, a vial of cursed habona, which is this highly lethal poison, was poured directly into his ear while he was sleeping. And the killer? His own brother Claudius, who immediately swooped in, stole the crown, and married the widowed Queen Gertrude, Hamlet's mom. Literally the ultimate toxic stepdad move. So the ghost demands revenge for this horrific murder, but he gives Hamlet one massive, specific rule: leave your mother out of it. Hamlet is furious, he's overwhelmed, and he realizes pretty quickly he needs a major cover story if he's going to safely investigate his new stepdad. So he swears his friends to secrecy and vows to put on an antic disposition. Translation for today, he decides to act completely unhinged, so absolutely no one views him as a real threat while he plots his next move. Moving into Section 2, a web of spies and paranoia. Because Elsinore rapidly devolves into a highly toxic environment where nobody trusts anybody. The castle basically turns into a full-on surveillance state. You've got the corrupt King Claudius and his incredibly meddling chief advisor Polonius literally eavesdropping on Hamlet from behind curtains. Claudius even brings in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who are supposed to be Hamlet's old childhood friends, and actually pays them to act as spies and monitor his every single move. The paranoia is practically oozing out of the walls with all these fake friends lurking around. And this kicks off an intense game of traps and counter-traps. Everyone's trying to diagnose exactly why Hamlet is acting so erratic. Polonius assumes it's just toxic lovesickness because Hamlet's been totally chaotic around Polonius's daughter, Ophelia. But Claudius is perceptive. He senses a very real, lethal threat underneath that crazy exterior. Meanwhile, Hamlet is out here playing 4D chess. He easily sees right through his so-called friends and knows exactly why they were sent. Now, the absolute key here is understanding why Hamlet handles this situation so differently than literally anyone else would. Let's compare our 3 princes of grief. They all shared the exact same catalyst, right? A murdered father demanding vengeance. But look at how they react. Fortinbras is a man of action, literally raising a whole army. Laertes is completely brash and just wants immediate blood. But Hamlet? He's deeply introspective. His whole method revolves around overthinking, faking madness, and endlessly plotting. And because of that specific personality trait, he becomes the absolute bottleneck for the entire story. Which brings us to Section 3, the mousetrap springs. This is the major turning point in our true crime timeline, where Hamlet finally decides to put the ghost's claims to the test. You really have to take a second to grasp the agonizing reality of this timeline. The murder happens, then 4 weeks pass, then another 4 weeks pass, then 2 whole months later, spies are finally sent. We're looking at weeks and months of complete inaction, heavy procrastination, and just spiraling thoughts. But then, boom, suddenly, 1 day later, Hamlet stages the mousetrap. Months of hesitation suddenly crash into one rapid-fire day where he decides to actually do something. And his genius countertrap is essentially the 16th century equivalent of a massive public call-out post. A group of traveling actors rolls into town, and Hamlet hires them to perform a play that recreates his father's exact murder, literally right down to the poison in the ear, directly in front of Claudius. He just wants to see if the king flinches. As he famously says, the play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. It is the ultimate pressure test. All right, Section 4, Escalation and Collateral Damage. The trap totally worked. Claudius completely freaks out, stops the play, and essentially confirms his guilt. But instead of a clean resolution, we get a disastrous spike in violence. Tracing the events here, Hamlet finally has his solid proof. He even finds Claudius alone and vulnerable. But, true to form, he overthinks it again. He refuses to kill Claudius while he's praying because he's suddenly stressing about the spiritual consequences. So his momentum just totally plummets. But then, bam, we get a completely violent, impulsive spike. Hamlet goes to his mother's room, realizes someone is spying on them from behind a tapestry, and just blindly stabs them. But it's not the king. It's the meddling advisor Polonius. With that one single thrust, Hamlet officially crosses the line into becoming a murderer himself, and Claudius immediately banishes him. And the collateral damage from that one rash mistake is absolutely tragic. Ophelia, sweet and innocent, just cannot process the grief of her ex-boyfriend murdering her dad. The shock drives her entirely to madness, and she ultimately drowns. Meanwhile, her brother Laertes rushes back from France, completely heartbroken and enraged. And Claudius, being the master manipulator he is, channels Laertes' raw anger and completely weaponizes him. He actually convinces Laertes to use a rigged, poison-tipped sword in what's supposedly just a friendly fencing match against Hamlet. Which takes us to our final section, Section 5, Anatomy of a Murder. We have officially arrived at the chaotic climax of our explainer, the rigged fencing match that turns Elsinore into an absolute bloodbath. Let's rapidly break down the exact mechanics of this final sequence. 1. The accidental toast. 2. The first blood. 3. The exchange. 4. The final vengeance. Claudius's paranoia is peaking right now, so he doesn't even trust just the poisoned foil. He prepares a backup cup of poisoned wine. It seems like a foolproof plan until it completely falls apart. Here is exactly how it all goes down. Step 1. Queen Gertrude unwittingly drinks to Hamlet's health right from that backup cup of poisoned wine. Step 2. Laertes strikes Hamlet, drawing first blood with the poison-tipped foil. Both men are now on a ticking clock. Step 3. The scuffle. The men fight, drop their weapons, and in the sheer chaos of it all, the foils get swapped. Hamlet then strikes Laertes with his own poison blade. Step 4. The final vengeance. As the queen collapses, an enraged Hamlet finally realizes the entire plot, stabs Claudius with the poison foil, and forces the remaining poison wine right down his throat. It's total carnage. Everyone perishes. Zooming out to look at the completed tragic arc, it's honestly wild how a single drop of poison in the ear from that inciting incident rippled out to create a total system collapse. The literal poison returns to claim the queen, the avenging son, the guilty king, and the tragic prince. By the time young Fortinbras arrives with his army, he literally just steps over the bodies to take the throne. Which leaves us with a final, lingering thought. In a world built entirely on paranoia, espionage, and surveillance, does overthinking actually protect us from making mistakes? Or does it just guarantee a significantly higher body count in the end? When you map out the mechanics of this 400-year-old masterpiece, the deadly cost of Hamlet's hesitation is absolutely undeniable. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I'll leave you to ponder that one.